I see. So with history in mind, I think we should transition to talking a little bit about your personal history with menswear. So I wanted to get a sense of how it is that you got involved or interested or passionate about menswear in the first place. And then I wanted to spend a little bit of time, because your style does have a very, very, very Ivy bent, which I love very much. Spend a little bit of time talking about how you became specifically passionate about that style.
Yeah, I thought about this for a bit, namely what this journey has been like, because I'm not sure I've sort of been taken a little bit aback by the growth of sort of the Instagram following, and this is such a thing I just did in order to alleviate boredom when pandemic struck and so on. It was like a lot of people did, but I had one before, but it wasn't really. It was just a way of maintaining a diary and have a certain routine to do every day. But my journey with Menswear goes way back. There is a long history here that I've only recently come to understand as just that, as a proper development. I mean, where I grew up in Norway in the late 90s, like early 2000s, it was not an environment that was conducive to developing a style of any kind, really. I mean, there were some things around at the time that are sort of come back again now with the 90s revival and everything, but not something I look back on very fondly. There was never that much in the family. I think my brother was a skater and so on, so it was a little bit like that, a little bit sort of crept in that way. But there was, very little that I look back on now that was sort of part of a style journey for myself. It was more, the usual sort of teenage way of navigating the demands and expectations of your peers. It's a very sort of classic story, but I never felt at home in any of the sort of pre-coded subcultures that were available at the time, which was like, broadly a skater culture, sort of 90s hip hop, Wu-Tang, gangsta style, which was very much in vogue in Europe at the time as well. It's often overlooked, I guess. Tommy Hilfiger jeans and such. Well, yeah, but people forget often that exactly what how broad and how quickly that appeal. I have vivid memories of. I had a friend who was like deeply into like Cash Money Records, like a Master P and this stuff down in the, and people would order these like videotapes. So I distinctly remember it, like my teens sitting in my friend's house watching like these homemade videos of American rappers from the South just like shooting guns inside their house. That was very. That was like the coolest thing you could probably you could imagine. In retrospect, Master P is not the greatest of 90s hip hop, to be fair. But
it's most definitely Gangstar.
Yeah, Gangstar. Yeah, Gangstar was like a little bit earlier, yes. Yeah, but I remember that time as well. Yeah.
Big L.
Yeah.
Big L.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. So but I have like the specific memories when I moved to Vienna in the early to mid 2000s. It was like my first sort of encounter with European style. This sort of classic. I didn't know this type of existed. I have a very sort of clear, vivid memory of being a student, going out to like the bars, getting drunk, and partying, and walking back home, like several miles back home to my apartment. And I would go through the city center of Vienna, and there would be these old school menswear stores. I think one of them might still be around still, but that was like the last gasp of the main shopping area in downtown Vienna being independently owned. And you would see these like Hungarian made shoes, or even bespoke shoemakers. And you would see these like insane shoes. I've never seen like a Budapest style shoe before. I think that's a reference that listeners will understand. It's like there's like a specific style of like a brogued shoe that's like has very strong connotation. It's called a Budapester in German. You can look it up, but it's like a very, very classic shoe. It's like I had no idea these type of things existed. And then of course I had no money to pursue anything like that type of style as a student. But there were, a few things that I acquired in this sort of classic style, like a Burberry trench coat or a couple of some Italian knitwear or something that I acquired. And perhaps I had a reputation in college for dressing up a little bit to a certain in that certain way. And I had but that was then Italian style, which was sort of where Vienna was oriented towards back then. Not so much like the English stuff, all of that stuff came later. But I lived in Italy for a while as an exchange student, and and that was when I noticed that like the wealth of craftsmanship that Italian made clothing still had, and it was on display. Every like little town in Italy would have these like exquisite stores that were very small, that would have incredible shirts, incredible shoes, incredible knitwear. No matter how small the town was, there was always one or two or three purveyors of this like exquisite, very expensive Italian made clothing. And then I would go to like Florence and Rome and see sort of the bigger, better known Italian brands. But that definitely left an impression on me. So it was all of these things that I sort of absorbed. I bought sort of approximations of some of these things whenever I could, without that much success. And when I lived in Paris later, that's sort of when it really dropped. Sort of then I saw. Remember similar experiences late at night, walking home from dinner with friends or in bars, walking across the Place Vendôme is where Charvet is. You can see the whole thing there. It's incredible. It's like one day, I think this is sort of the style that I would like. It's like, this is something that is just staked out as a possible destination. I know now that these kind of exquisite things exist in the world, and I think I would like one day to approach it in some way. Without, I could say, that much success at the time. But same with English stuff. There was particularly one store, I think it was called like Old England, a legendary Parisian store that would have all the classic. They would have like, especially all the English shoemakers were represented there. I saw like Tricker's shoes for the first time, and I thought it was the greatest thing I ever saw, were these like brogue Tricker's boots, sort of as a poor student, although I did, because of the way when you're on like research fellowships and stuff works as a student before, you get paid in advance. So basically you get all the money you're getting for like 6 months gets paid out in advance. So at a certain point you have money in your account. You can afford some very extravagant things if you budget things out correctly. And I would do this. There was things I bought, particularly in Italy. I bought this like tan leather, like Chelsea boots that were incredible. And I wore them for 7 or 8 years after that. But they cost probably the equivalent of what was probably around $400 then, which was, I still would really love to know what the maker is. I have no idea. But it was some small craftsman in Florence, I think. And a couple of things like that. I bought like a few exquisite things that I then wore for a very, very long time, until they fell apart pretty much. And that was sort of my way of negotiating that type of journey. And it's only now in the last couple of years that I've sort of, through vintage, through a couple of other ways, that I've been able to sort of recapture that European classic menswear dimension that I always associated with as my style. So it's, when we get to Ivy, that's like, I've approached it in this type of back or roundabout way, that the actual sort of gold standard from a very young age was this sort of expensive, exquisite materials in the old European way, but not in the fashion-y way in that sense. Like I remember in Paris on the left bank, you see these like older gentlemen in cashmere sweaters and this like paraboot comfortable shoes, thick corduroys that are like probably cashmere from like Charvet or something that cost like $900, but worn very, very threadbare and thin. And that was sort of, this is incredible. Silk scarves, that type of particular style of like old Parisian men would wear around the Montparnasse and all the way down to the Latin, not actually in the Latin Quarter where people actually don't look great at all, but a little bit further up, you would encounter these guys. And that was sort of the real romance. We're like, yeah, this is for me what I would like to approach. Yeah, it was only when as it does happen, like when you get a little bit more income and so you can finally make some of those choices, then that's where I sort of trying to get back to. And I'm still sort of perhaps on that journey.